Foundation.
Good afternoon and welcome to the City Club of Cleveland. I'm Hewitt Shaw, the president of the City Club's Board of Directors. It is my privilege today to introduce to you James M., better known as Jim Petro, the Chancellor of the Ohio Board of Regents. Mr. Petro was appointed to the Chancellor position by Governor Kasich in March of 2011, and in that role leads the University System of Ohio, one of the largest systems of public higher education in the nation. Under his leadership, the Board of Regents has expanded commercialization efforts at the universities. They have developed strategies for increasing the state's overall attainment of degrees and workforce credentials for its students, streamlined technology resources, created OARNet, a high-speed statewide broadband pipeline to carry data at super speeds to benefit Ohio's researchers and job creators, and improve the coordination and collaboration of educational services across many state educational institutions. Mr. Petro's 30-plus year career in public service has included his service to our state as our Attorney General, our Auditor of State, and his positions as a state representative, Cuyahoga County Commissioner, and Rocky River City Councilman and Law Director. He has also been engaged in the private practice of law and currently continues to be involved providing pro bono legal assistance to the Ohio Innocence Project. Mr. Petro, a Brooklyn native, is a graduate of Denison University and the Case Western Reserve University School of Law. Mr. Petro has announced his retirement from his chancellorship position at the end of the month, so we are particularly honored to have him at our podium today to share his important insights informed by his distinguished career serving our state. It is my pleasure to present to you Jim Petro.
You know, I appreciate so much your kind words, Hewitt, and I'm looking out in the audience and seeing so many people that I know from so many years that I have enjoyed the wonderful climate of Cleveland, and that doesn't mean the weather, but it is great to be back here. I'm delighted to be with you. I point out occasionally that my beautiful mellifluous voice that has been heard here at the City Club in past years is no longer. And yet I still love every opportunity I have for advocacy. I don't care where it is. I mentioned to Jim Foster that I've actually, in my pro bono role with the Innocence Project, have relished opportunities to argue at courts of appeals in Ohio because the voice is so wretched that the judges pay attention, which is kind of a neat thing. Doesn't always happen that way. Before I get too far along, those of you who know me, and that's at least half the audience or more, and I see, again, I keep looking out and I see more people that I've not seen in a couple years or many months, and it's just so delightful to have you here. But I want to reintroduce Nancy, who is my bride now of 40 years as of December. Nancy, if you might just wave. And I'll throw in a plug. You know, she's a great writer. I'm here to talk about higher ed, but she and I do programs around wrongful conviction, criminal justice reform, because of our joint effort, mostly her writing talent and some of my memories as much as anything, in a book called False Justice. And we do spend a good deal of time on that. And the weakness of my performance is so dramatically changed because of the strength of her performance that we do kind of a neat program together. I also want to acknowledge university leadership from across northeastern Ohio. I'm not going to name every one of you. I know you all so well, and I have such enormous respect for what you do and for what we have both in public universities and private universities, Barb. We've got a lot here that really recommends northeastern Ohio and greater Cleveland. And from my role in the University System of Ohio, I've come to believe that we have an outstanding network of public and private universities in Ohio. And so because of that, and I'll get into a little critique here and there, because of that we have opportunities to do so much better. When Governor Kasich, well, let me make one more reference. The last time I was here was April 2006. I was running for governor. I lost the nomination the next month to a fellow who didn't really ever want to appear in a debate with me, and so he didn't come. And so that forum, which was intended to be a debate among the two Republican candidates seeking the nomination for governor, I was here all alone. It's kind of a good deal, actually. And in that process, I talked a great deal about an extensive platform. Much of it included higher ed. And so some of the things I'm going to talk about now are things that they're not new points of advocacy for me. They're things I've been advocating both in this forum. I know I gave a speech that is remembered by many in 2005 when I was Attorney General at the Metropolitan Club of Columbus that detailed dramatically changes in higher ed, in governance, in what we do to kind of bring a system together to coordinate our programs, all those kind of things that I've had the privilege now of actually being directly engaged in. I talked about that a great deal in the governor's race and some of it right here in the past. I was somewhat shocked when John Kasich asked me to come and see him right after the governor's election, maybe a week later. I had no idea what he wanted to talk about. I was partner in charge of a major Ohio law firm in their Columbus office, kind of minding my own business and in doing things that were enjoyable. And suddenly the governor put on the table the notion of becoming engaged in higher ed, in coordinating and looking at the budgets, in looking at broad policy matters to which I would have some free rein. Now, the governor put some exceptions on that, but some free rein on things that I felt were important. And it didn't take me very long to think, you know, I've had so many wonderful years in public service, wonderful opportunities, really privileged to have those opportunities, that I'm going to grab this one again. Couple of years, there's things I care a lot about, and at the end of those couple of years, if I can get those things at least in play, then I'm going to have had a pretty satisfying time. Always remembering that I promised myself, partially because of a health issue that gave me the funny voice I have now, and partially because I also had hip issues. I've had 7 hips, and 3 of them last year. So, you know, actually 5 of them if you count the old ones that were there first. But I mean, when you put all that together, you think to yourself, you know, you don't necessarily want to work full-time until you're 75 years old. So I'll be 65, and that kind of drove my decision. But I did have an array of things that I wanted to focus on when the governor talked to me about getting engaged in this job, and I really have had the privilege of doing that, and I think we've made some progress. Interestingly, so many of them begin with C. I don't know why. But I'm going to touch on each one of them and talk about why I think it's important. And the first one is collaboration. I've always felt that our university system, and this goes back to my days in the General Assembly, was a little bit goofy because education is a pre-K through 20, or as John Kasich is fond of saying now, pre-K to J, J meaning job, a pre-K to 20 endeavor. And the fact that we have one governance for primary and secondary education and another governance for higher education never made that much sense to me. In my campaign for governor, I talked about a collaborative agency that dealt with the whole spectrum, the whole continuum of public education as we know it. We don't have that, but we're getting closer. 2 weeks ago, I moved the entire Board of Regents staff into the Ohio Department of Education building. Now, in doing that, I gave up beautiful 36-floor space in Rhodes Tower where I could literally see from the north, or looking south or looking west for 30 miles in either direction. I left that for a kind of a crummy little office on the 7th floor of the Department of Education building because now the state superintendent of public instruction is 50 feet away. He can't not return my phone call because I'll be pounding on his door. The point there is already, and I got an email yesterday from a staff member who said, you know, we were a little skeptical, but this really was a good idea. Already I have met with and chatted with over lunch in the little vending room downstairs, people who are my counterparts and we're beginning to get to know each other. The whole notion was we need to be totally collaborative in higher education, in pre-K through 12, which I, again, begin to look at as pre-K to J or pre-K to 20. The fact that it's got to be something that we work together. Now, among the things that I was able to advance in the budget that we are currently completing was the notion that the superintendent and I should jointly make significant decisions. We're doing that now on a whole array of things that ultimately are going to replace the Ohio graduation test, which, no disrespect to those engaged in developing it 10 or 12 years ago or more, actually maybe 15 years ago. But I think it's kind of been folly. I don't know that it's had much of an impact. It's giving an 8th grade material test to 10th graders to prove that they can finish 12th grade. It never made sense to me. So we're doing a lot of different new kind of testing, national standard testing, testing that's geared to the core curricula of our public high schools and private high schools across the country. All of those things are things now that are jointly decided between the superintendent and the chancellor. That needs to continue, and at least with our new location, we have the opportunity to do that. I also believe in consolidation. People wonder, you've had some neat opportunities. What was your favorite job? Believe it or not, I loved being state auditor. I know it sounds boring, but being auditor of the state of Ohio gave me the opportunity to really get into the nitty-gritty of government operation, what can make it cheaper, what can make it faster, what can make it better. And I think we strive to do that for the 8 years I was in the job, and I think my successors have continued that trend, which was really a significant new trend that we began in 1994. I believe that consolidation can be valuable, and so some of the first things I did as I got into becoming, this is another C, this is C number 2. Consolidation became a principal objective of mine with the whole agency that is known as the Board of Regents. In program approval, oversight, basic finance, we have about 75 employees. In technology, at another wing up next to the Ohio State campus, we have about another 120 employees. And it's technology that really needed a reordering to allow us to really develop technology, as fast as we can to keep up with private sector development and really keep up with the technology that's not only used in our public universities, but used dramatically in things like OhioLink, which is a library system that's used by 89 public and private universities and higher education institutions in Ohio. All of that really requires the technological advances that we've been engaged in, and most recently, and you probably heard about it, Ohio is the only state that has broad capability of transmitting data from all of your campuses. You now know that. We've tied everybody in at 100 gigabits per second. I don't need to tell you how fast that is, because I don't even know how fast that is. But I'm told that it is so fast that nobody can compete with that anywhere in the country. That's a big business advance for Ohio, and that, through coordinating the operations of what I renamed OTEC, has allowed us to kind of evolve into some of these advances that I think are really worthwhile. The next C, commercialization. For years we've known that we have great research, good product opportunity that could be the product resulting from that research, but we never do anything with it. And one way to create jobs in Ohio is to take the results of our research and make that research an economic reality, make it commercialized so that we've got items that we can take to market, we can get businesses that will acquire or invest in that, and use that product to help create jobs and build Ohio's economy. Who knew how to do it, and who knew how to go about doing it? I said to the governor early on, there's a guy who's petitioned you, he sent you a letter, he was on the Board of Regents, his term expired and he left the Board of Regents. He'd like to be back on. He's eligible to do so. His whole career, and this is Vinny Gupta. I don't know if any of you know Vinny Gupta. He's been working with Jumpstart for years in Cleveland. He probably knows more about commercializing the results of research and development than anybody I know. And I said to the governor, this guy could be a worthwhile member of the Board of Regents. He became a regent. We talked about developing a task force to examine commercialization. it became, and all of our university and community college leadership really are well aware of the activity and the activism, but I think we now have a blueprint on what we need to do and how we can do it to commercialize the results of our university research, to make it, number one, a revenue generator for Ohio broadly, create jobs, and number two, a revenue generator for our universities. And hopefully that's going to be part of the outcome. The next C that I've kind of sought to deal with, at least become internally advocates with the administration, with the General Assembly, are issues around cost. The cost of an education does not go down. And we know that we have to be sure that we have access and affordability, or we will have a great deal of difficulty advancing Ohio. We need to have within our public universities, certainly, this is an aside, and I'm not pandering to Case Western Reserve or Denison or any place else that I might have been affiliated with personally, but I often want to remind those who talk about our role in the public university system about the enormous value we have in Ohio with our private universities. They would say, well, you know, they're expensive, they're kind of for elites and everything like that. Frankly, no. If you look at the students that are coming out of our private universities in Ohio, many of them are paying no more than they would pay at a public university, because those universities go out and put the arm on their alumni, and I know about that, and raise money so that they can give scholarships to worthy students who are from Ohio. We have a great network of public universities that do so much to educate Ohioans from all economic levels and really build on Ohio's potential future because of that education. So I'm throwing that in because I do recognize the importance of what we have in our private universities. But the cost component remains really critical, which is why we talk now about the prospect of developing a 4-year guarantee. I know that my university presidents here are shuddering when I talk about a 4-year guarantee on tuition, or a 2-year guarantee for our community colleges, something that people can budget around. A recognition that we need to continue to keep a cap on the amount of tuition increase. There's a cap currently. I'm sure there'll be a cap in the new budget. That needs to be always in place. A recognition that, from my perspective, we need to do far more to make sure that people in our high schools are, when they're able to do so, developing credit toward a college degree. Dual credit courses that are going to be new opportunities. We're looking for ways to finance that even today as I look at the budget that's going to be introduced on February 4th. We're in discussions about what we can do to make sure that dual credit is incentivized toward our public schools so that they are urging their students who are capable of doing so to go to the community college or engage with the community college faculty to get college credit while they're still in high school. We talk often about 3-year degrees, and people thought, what, do you want to cheapen the degree and hurry it along? No, we want to make sure that the 12th grade year isn't the waste of time that I know that it can be for the student who's already completed their basic requirements and who basically coasts their last year of high school. We don't want them to coast. We want them to do more. We want them to have that senior year getting real quality opportunities to advance the ball toward a college degree. Which brings me to the biggest C of all from my perspective, and one that everybody on our staff knows, and I think our university presidents know that I've been kind of pushing on from the day I started, and that is completion. I want to read you something because, and I think our university presidents have heard me read some of this before, but it really moved me when I saw this, and it was from Fortune magazine of some time ago. Jeff Colvin, who was one of the editors at Fortune, had written an op-ed piece, but he points out, and I'm just going to read a couple of lines, incomes in the broad middle class have gone nowhere for more than 20 years after rising slowly and steadily through most of the 20th century. Kind of as an aside, I'll say, we're not advancing the middle class the way we need to as an economy and as a society. I think we hear that and we know that to be true. The article then goes on to say that our economy continually demands higher level skills from workers, and for most of the 20th century, the U.S. workforce kept up. 1970, at that point, a large majority finished high school, and many went on to college. American workers at that point had become the world's best educated, and we as a nation, as an economy, and our workers earned the rewards. Then in the 1970s, America's level of education stopped rising. The high school graduation rate peaked at 77% in 1969 and has since dropped to about 69%. College rates, too, stopped rising. The economy kept demanding more workers with advanced skills, but we stopped producing them. At the same time, other countries relentlessly educated their people, so the U.S. workforce fell from number 1 in the world to the middle of the pack. Even beyond that, let me point out that it fell from number 1 in the world in 1970 in baccalaureate degree attainment and associate degree attainment to what is now number 15 in the world. We have a long way to go. And here in Ohio, it became very clear to me, we're not doing so hot. We're actually in the bottom quartile of the 50 states in terms of baccalaureate and associate degree attainment. We really have to do a lot better. And I have to rest my voice for about 2 seconds. To do better, we needed to really look at kind of the old ways, ladies and gentlemen, the old ways of running universities and colleges, and look at some of the new ways and new ideas, ideas that can spur completion. To do that and to look at those, I put together a task force that focused on completion. I think we all recognized a couple of factors that needed to be examined, but that task force completed its work 2 months ago. They issued a very fine report with 20 significant recommendations and then a whole array of other discussions. But some of those significant recommendations, I believe, as the universities and community colleges change their operation to recognize some of these ideas and to put them in play, I think it's going to change dramatically our results in getting people to graduate from college. Right now, more than half of those who enter our public colleges never get a degree. And I point out that they kind of waste their money because you can't put 5 semesters of college on a resume. You need to have something more than that. So completion and strategies that will drive completion become one of the most important things we're engaged in. On the controversial side, our university presidents have come together and in some ways perhaps kicking and screaming, but they've gotten a formula now that in the state portion of assistance to the universities is going to be driven more by their success in graduating students. And that's worth doing that. There'll be a lot of debate about that as we continue to go on. But then there's so many more things we can really focus on. Our universities over the years have taken the view sometimes that 6 years was okay. And we talk about the 6-year degree. And I want to start more and more keeping track of our degree attainment on a 4-year basis. A baccalaureate degree is supposed to take 4 years, not 6. And I think we need to keep that frame of reference in mind. The failings of any university system to graduate its students has a lot of components, but one of them is too many choices. That stifles kids for some reason, I'm not sure why, and too much time. And so we have to remember we have to drive those factors, both time and choices, and keep a lid on it. Keep a framework around it. Engage in what we call intrusive advising so that people are able to make decisions about their major, do it fairly promptly, put a direction in place for them, limit the number of choices they have to make each and every year, and give them the core values and the core education they need to ultimately get the associate degree and then again the baccalaureate degree. The task force's 20 recommendations included a variety of very good ideas, many of which are ideas that are going to be adopted. One of them that I really enjoy looking at, and I will tell you that Tri-C kind of kicked it off, and I praise Jerry Sue Thornton to the hills on this one, because among the things they do now is they go back to their students who've left Tri-C without the associate degree because they're ready to move on to a baccalaureate degree granting institution. So they move to that institution, and then they hit their 60 hours, their 36 hours of core curricula. Their entitlement to an associate degree, but they never get one. And Tri-C is now reaching out back to those students who were there earlier and saying, we want to give you an associate degree. We want you to have that first step toward ultimate baccalaureate degree attainment, which is the AA or the AS. We're going to do that, and we're going to encourage it. I began encouraging programs similar to that, where in fact universities after 2 years, if within their network of branch campuses have a program where they grant associate degrees, then look at their students and basically say to their students at the point where they've gotten 60 hours of credit, you're now entitled to receive an associate degree. If you want one, we'll grant it to you. No commencement necessary. Here it is. More and more, that interim recognition, I think, number one, makes Ohio look better with more degrees, and number two, really becomes an inducement to the student, recognizing, okay, I've received this accolade, this interim reward that shows that I'm making progress. Now I want to continue to make progress toward the baccalaureate degree that we need. Ohio's economic strength is in its resources, in its people, in its universities, in what we have to offer. What we really need to be doing is utilizing it fully so that ultimately we have opportunities for economic growth based on the skills and the education of our citizens. That's where we will drive growth. I'm not the only one to say it. Governor John Kasich, who I think is truly one of our most innovative governors in a long time. I have great respect for what he's doing. Frankly, I didn't know John very well. We served in the state legislature together for 2 years. He went on to Congress. I eventually became a county commissioner, went into state office. We'd see each other periodically, but I have come to believe that the boldness that he continues to function under, the innovation that he continues to drive, including innovation that I've now described as it relates to degree completion and other things, is going to take Ohio a long way. And I feel pretty good about the opportunity I've had working in that. One last one, because I can see the clock ticking there, and at 1 o'clock I have to stop. If I don't stop, somebody's going to hit me. And so I'm going to keep moving on this, but I want to say one other thing with a C, and I'm doing this because I'm trying to drive a budget item now that will throw some pretty big dollars into a broad-based plan of co-ops and internships. All of our university presidents, all of the public presidents here, and I think we've got one with CWRU too. We have made an investment this year using some casino dollars for partnerships among universities and community colleges, and then partnerships of those institutions with Ohio businesses to create more and more internships. The program we have right now will create a little over 3,000 internships. I want to do more. And I think among the things we can do to boost Ohio's economy, to boost the skills of our young people, to give them a leg up on getting a job when they graduate, is the opportunity for internships throughout the private sector all over Ohio. We need to do more with it. The program we have right now, and I think every one of these presidents are engaged in that, but we need to have much more resources and time dedicated to the development of these kind of programs that gets the young people's foot in the door. I had a lunch meeting about a year ago with the CEO of one of our major companies, and he just confided in me. He says, you know, if you can do more internship funding, if you can bring and organize these programs around proposals from the universities, it will go a long way to bolster Ohio's economy. We, as a company, he told me, we will never hire anyone who hasn't had some opportunity to work here, or we would get to know them. I always use the phrase, the better the devil you know than the devil you don't. But you do need to have that introduction, both from business to the student, and then student to the world of business, to really be able to succeed in a broad fashion. So another one, and I've got lots of other things I want to say, but I don't want to shirk the opportunity for Q&A. Internships, we need more. I'm going to be pushing in the next 2 weeks as we put our budget together to get more and more money from somewhere, and I'm looking at a variety of sources, to really put together a broader, more comprehensive internship program. I have loved working in higher ed, and I do think it is the future of Ohio. We need to have a lean, effective system, time-sensitive, cost-sensitive, and doing all it can to drive more and more educational opportunities to our students, and making it very clear through the high school years that you need to go further. Nothing that you've done so far in getting a diploma is going to guarantee you a career. What will begin to guarantee you a career is post-secondary opportunity. It can be a credential. It can be that credential that has a certificate that has some economic value in the workplace. It can be an associate degree. It can, from a preference, be a baccalaureate degree. But literally, every one of our students must have something beyond high school to really compete in the future. And we need to focus on getting there, and Ohio will thrive. Having said all that, it's exactly 1 o'clock. Talk about timing.
Yeah, sure. Today at the City Club of Cleveland, we are listening to a Friday forum featuring Jim Petro, Chancellor of the Ohio Board of Regents. We will return to our speaker momentarily for the traditional City Club questions. Please formulate your questions now and remember to be brief and to the point. We welcome all of you here today and those listening to 90.3 WCPN Idea Stream, WCLV, WTAM, or one of the many radio stations across the country that carry our forums. Our television broadcast partner is WVIC PBS Idea Stream. Television broadcasts of the City Club are made possible by Cleveland State University and PNC. Our live webcast is supported by the University of Akron. Closed captioning of our programs is made possible by the Nordson Corporation. We would like to welcome today guests at tables hosted by Cleveland State University, Cuyahoga County Community College, the Cuyahoga County Republican Party, Case Western Reserve University School of Law, Kent State University, and Notre Dame College. Thank you for your support. Now we would like to return to our speaker for our traditional City Club question and answer period. We welcome questions from everyone, including guests. Holding microphones today are Development and Marketing Associate Michael Cromaldi and Program Director Carrie Miller. May we have the first question, please?
Jim, congratulations and thanks for all you have done in the government for local and state. We appreciate it. Curious to ask, we hear in this country so much about how our standards and education levels are losing out to a lot of other countries, test scores or not. You mentioned the baccalaureate situation. If the president were to call you into the office, Oval Office, and ask your advice and counsel on how we go about improving education in this country, both the secondary level and post-secondary, what would be your recommendations? Whether it matter of standards, funding, and would your recommendation be the federal government should be less involved, and if so, why, or more involved, and why?
Bruce, that's the most comprehensive, complicated question I've ever had. I'm not sure I can answer it in less than a half an hour. But funding is an issue. There's no question about that. And coordination is an issue, and I come back to that. We have, and I'm not going to give anybody a hard time as it relates to funding K through 12, but it really has been somewhat disproportionate from my perspective. We have continually increased funding for primary and secondary education and really not done the same with higher ed. It is a continuum. It is a program that has to go and be available to our young people and beyond, from pre-K to wherever it leads you, to ultimately a job and a career. And to do that, we need to balance funding and balance the management so that we're really dealing with the entire continuum of education. I bring back the point that I made a few minutes ago. There's no one who gets a high school diploma who's really ready for the careers of today and tomorrow. They need something more. We have them in Ohio. We need to be sure that they're getting the kind of guidance at their high school level to make it very clear that career tech and a career tech opportunity, even while they're still in high school, is a great option. We need to be sure that dual credit opportunity, juniors and seniors who are already getting college level work because they're capable of doing it, remains an opportunity. If you asked me to do anything, it would be to broaden those universally. to actually be looking not toward a diploma. And, you know, I made a statement a couple weeks ago, and people are going to hate me for this. Just do away with the diploma. When you're ready to move on from grade 10 or grade 11, the opportunity and the financial resources are there to move you on. There's no great celebration and commencement about getting a diploma. And again, I'm speaking with some measure of controversy here, so bear with me, because I know this is not something that will be quickly adopted. But the notion is, where does a diploma get you in today's economy? Not very much. So why reward it? Why make it seem to a student, it's the end of the road, you got your diploma, you've made it? No, you haven't. You've got more to go, and you better realize that that's got to be part of the process, and that we as a government, as a society, need to be funding those opportunities in a way that we have funded over the years primary and secondary education. We need to drive the point that certificates, degrees, and training beyond high school really has to occur to anyone who wants to have a meaningful career and help build Ohio's economy. So that's the advice I'd give the president, and he'd probably look at me and say, I already know that. But that's okay.
Chancellor Petro.
Yes. There we go.
Hello.
Hi.
The six-year degree completion very often includes for college students multiple internships and cooperative education programs.
And that's a good thing.
That is a good thing, but, and your commitment to internships and co-ops and more money for them is admirable. How do you align those visions with the guaranteed 3- and 4-year baccalaureate degree completion?
There's no doubt that as you have an internship, it doesn't necessarily need to delay your 4-year accumulation of 120 credit hours, which is kind of the standard that we have right now for a 4-year baccalaureate degree. It doesn't need to do that. Certainly co-ops do. We have a great model in Ohio at the University of Cincinnati where literally 20% of the student body are in co-op programs, and if they go as fast as they possibly can, will still graduate only in 5 years because they go to school for a semester, they go to work for a semester, and they work full time. That's a great program. It does have to do that more and more in Ohio is great, and I want to see that evolve, but it's very cost intensive. It's more complicated to put that together than simple internships, simple part-time opportunities to get kids into a workplace environment and teach them more broadly than just the classroom activity that they've been engaged in. I think they can, in other words, what I'm getting to is degree completion that is focused on doing so in a timely way is not inconsistent with co-ops and internships in a broad sense, and I think we can do them both and still drive completion. We don't want to have people switching majors, moving from one discipline to another, and taking 6 years. It's bad for the economy, and it's bad for the opportunity to really achieve a degree. So we need to do something different and new and keep focused on that. Another one I'll throw out, because I haven't brought it up yet, is the whole notion of developmental education, of the need to get kids ready because they weren't ready when they graduated from high school, to get kids college ready. We got to get past that. And right now, the assessments and the programs that I'm putting together jointly, and really following the lead of the state superintendent, because he probably knows a little bit more about it than I do, are going to give us the opportunity to really assure college readiness far more frequently. But I do think also at our universities, they should, and the law is now limiting them, and will limit them totally down the road, from offering developmental education to new incoming freshmen, and that's a good thing. Better yet, take the kids, make sure they've hit a benchmark level, which is what's been presented now, and then go off to college, and if they're a little weak, put them in there, give them some tutoring, give them some support, but don't put them in developmental courses. We've got to move away from that because it takes too much time, and it really is a disincentive for kids staying in college. And we've got to find ways to assure that kids are encouraged with advising, with guidance, with the course curricula that's being offered to them, encouraged to stay with it and complete the degree that they set out to get.
Chancellor Petro, we appreciate what you've done with Governor Kasich in collaboration, particularly in capital improvements and other budgetary considerations for colleges. And I know we're all happy that you've become successfully more hippie. But I want to ask you about another C, choice. Choice, starting at pre-K or K right through 20. We have some things called vouchers that not everybody is happy with in Ohio. We do some of that at the secondary and primary education level, not much at the college level. So I'm going to ask you to include the college level and the private universities that we have in Ohio, and allowing students to have more choice to tailor their education to their specific needs, both at public and at private schools.
Homer, thank you. I have always advocated, as I evolved in my state responsibilities, and as I saw the opportunity for more primary and secondary school choice with charters, with some opportunity for vouchers, I've advocated for that because I've believed that that choice can be good. Now, we've got to try to assure that the schools that are there are performing when they're the non-public schools, and so that's kind of the oversight that's involved. I actually was kind of privileged in 1998 and 99. There were already charter schools in place, charter school law that was governing them, and the governance came into serious question. And so I was the auditor of state at the time, and I was asked if I would put a staff group together to rewrite the law. And that's what occurred back then. And it served well. It needs tweaking, but it served pretty well. I think that for the great long term in the history of Ohio, voucher opportunities and charter opportunities, parental choice becomes a worthwhile thing for Ohio. I believe it's going to be valuable in the long run. There have been some bumps in the road, but I believe it'll be valuable. I also think that students need to have more choices, even beyond our public institutions. I've been an aggressive advocate for assuring that we include the privates, actually, in part because of all the privates already do to help Ohio without taking very much in public funds, but to make sure the privates are significant partners in what we call OCOG, which is our Ohio scholarship program. Currently, I think this next budget will reflect about $80 to $90 million, more than half of it directed at students who are going to our private schools, our private nonprofits in Ohio. And I think that's a valuable thing. My advocacy has been directed at trying to increase those scholarship dollars. They're principally need-based scholarships, but I think we need to have more. And so I don't see us funding private schools per se. I actually somewhat regret the end of, I forget what we called it, the Ohio, not the choice grant, the Ohio, the one that was actually the $500 a year, $200 a year. Pardon me? OIG, the Ohio Institutional Grant. Thank you. And we used to have that amount go to every student, public or private, and that was a worthwhile program, and it was ended, I think, in 2007. And frankly, I'm sorry it ended. I think it was worthwhile. So the objective is to get every student we possibly can to do something post-secondary, credential, certificate program, associate degree, baccalaureate degree, something, because it's critical to our economic success and to their economic success. And how we fund that, I'm open to a lot of new ideas. But I'm leaving, so I don't know.
Chancellor,
Rick?
it is my impression, and I'd be open to correction if it's wrong, that over the last 50 years, there have been two crossing lines in the broad pattern of finance for higher education, let's say specifically in Ohio. And one is the declining percentage of state money going to public universities, now down to a surprisingly low number in my impression. Mm-hmm. And the other is the rising percentage of private philanthropy coming into the state university, something which 50 years ago I think was almost a startling notion. And would you comment just on those crossing lines and perhaps the power balance that creates, or the tension within the governance of the universities? Is private philanthropy taking too strong a role? Is the state's role receding more than you'd like?
Rick, thank you. To paraphrase George H.W. Bush, declining public funds bad, increasing foundation funds good. There was real humor there. What's happening here? I'm really missing it right now. I think the point that I'm making is, yeah, I'm not real happy about the fact that budget constraints have made higher education support more limited than it once was. In my day in the legislature in the 80s, we were increasing support to higher education about 7% a year. And that was sometimes more than might be necessary. It shifted dramatically in the 1990s and thereafter, so that the dollars that were increasing were more focused on K through 12 and very much reduced as it related to higher education. I don't think that's a good trend for Ohio. And this next budget is not going to change that trend. As we reconfigure state operations broadly, I think there will be opportunities to free up more resources for higher education. If I were governor, and I never will be, I tried once, but if I were governor, I would understand that we first have to kind of reshape the state operations and how we spend our money, and then begin looking at the priorities. And that may be, again, kind of a better mix between K through 12 and higher ed than is currently the case, because it is very disparate right now in terms of the dollars for one versus the limited dollars for the other. All I can say is I'm all for it. Where we're going to get there, we're going to get there hopefully down the road, past my time, but get there in any event. I do think it is a good thing that public universities, private universities have been squeezing their alums for years. And I've been happy to be a contributor to my two schools. And my wife actually is chairman for the second year now, and probably a third year next year, for Denison's Major Gifts campaign. So she's really squeezing the big donors. And I watch her do that every day. So I'm all for it. I think it's good that we have a community of support from those who've been benefited by their opportunity in higher education to give back to those institutions. So I think that's been a very good trend. I'm happy that that's happening.
Thank you for all you've done for higher education in Ohio. The question is, with all of the focus that's on getting people through in 4 years, what's being done to ensure the quality of the education and the worth of the degrees that are granted?
I've got about 7 or 8 people down here who can answer that question much better than I can. There are leaders, our presidents of our community colleges and universities. Within our system, the Ohio University Public University System, we have 23 community colleges, 14 universities. Their leadership, I think, is outstanding. The quality that they focus on is driving quality. We see the ratings of our public institutions continue to increase as they're perceived nationally. That, to me, is a big deal. I'm not, with the leadership that I see every day, I'm not concerned about quality. I think we have quality in our public institutions. I think a degree from any one of our public institutions has great value in the marketplace and great value to the individual. It's the best I can tell you.
Good afternoon. My question relates to cost, but in particular about student debt. We see increasing debt for these students, especially a concern for folks who do not finish with a degree.
Yes.
But even for folks who finish with a bachelor's degree, the amount of debt, tens of thousands, maybe $100,000 in debt. What's the state doing to address that? What can be done to address that as the middle class gets squeezed?
It is a great concern of mine. One of the things that I think we probably should try to do more of is educate the student. It's beginning, but it's not totally underway yet. We need to make sure that the student understands, one, what they're getting into, and two, what it's going to mean to them financially down the road. The role of the university or the college and the student, both public and private, really is a partnership. And there shouldn't be any effort on the part of the university. And this is the case, I'm not going to pinpoint public universities or private universities. I'm going to say that across the spectrum, universities present to the student the package. And the package says, here's the money you're going to get from a variety of sources, and here's what the bottom line is, what it's going to cost you out of your pocket. What a good deal. And unfortunately, what the student doesn't always understand, and this requires their own self-education, is that some of those sources, well, not some of them, generally, usually all of them are, well, a big part of it is money they're going to have to pay back. Sometimes students don't even realize that. They think, oh boy, you know, I'm getting $18,000 to go to XYZ University, and they don't really understand that 5 of that's a scholarship and 13 is a debt that you're going to have to pay off. There needs to be education. There needs to be the partnership that I described. There needs to be an awareness. Thankfully, we have those monies available. Thankfully, the resources are there, but students have to be careful. They have to be financially smart, not to get themselves in too deep. We also see a problem, and we meaning the Board of Regents, look at this and have some debate, and I won't name them. Some of the infractions that I've seen that shock me and shock the conscience of anybody who sees it really often deal with proprietary schools, for-profit entities, that really sock it to somebody, and then ultimately I've seen, you know, circumstances where they say down the road, well, you really don't have the requisite intellect or skills to ultimately get into a career in this direction, but we're thankful that we had the opportunity to give you some education. Well, you know, thanks for nothing, and now owe you $40,000. Those kind of things, those should be brought to the level of consumer issues. And in the Attorney General's office, they have a great consumer department. I'm well aware of it. I had my opportunity working with them. But I think there could be some real focus on those instances where the consumer, the student, has been misadvised or given some bad advice, to actually look at that from a consumer standpoint. It is a problem, but there's not any single culprit. And students need to educate themselves in a great measure to avoid the problem.
Jim, thanks a lot for your support for the school choice. I'm from one of the charter schools in Cleveland, Horizon Science Academy. And my question is, with all the changes coming to our state, and what are some work or studies done in our higher education agency to make sure that teacher preparation is also adjusted and ready for next year's?
We're about to do some things that I have advocated internally that will establish standards for admission to our schools of education. There have not been, in most of them, in some of our, as many of our presidents know, sometimes there are good standards, and in some private and public universities there aren't any standards. And I think we have to find a real common ground there. We're working on it aggressively right now. In fact, I had a meeting on it yesterday. And it's been something that I've convinced Michael Sawyers, who's the interim state superintendent, that we really need jointly to come together and develop admittance standards requiring a certain level of academic achievement before you can even get into a school of education. Because we have some schools of education, and then frankly we need to upgrade the cut score in Ohio for those who are ultimately going to become teachers. It's lower, it's one of the lower scores in the country, and I think we need to re-examine that also. In other words, affirmative steps need to be taken to upgrade the results, the product of our 51 schools of education in Ohio.
Good afternoon, Jim.
Great. Hi.
Hi. You talked about accelerated degrees and making sure that people get done in 4 years. And my question is twofold. The first is, how do remedial courses? I just read recently that many colleges are saying that the students coming in need 2 years sometimes in some subjects to in remedial courses, which of course would add. And also, in my daughter's college career, there was a push for her to get her decision-making done very early. And I think that we often push kids to say, well, what do you want to be when you grow up at 18? And who knew? And look at how many of us in this room who have probably had 5 or 6 different careers.
If you're talking about your older daughter, I think she went to Tennessee, and they do that, and I think that's a good thing.
You know what?
Oh.
I'll talk to you later.
Oh, okay.
But she was the only one in her running class that graduated in 4 years.
I know. Our daughters ran together in high school, and so that's how we know one another. They were both then college level cross country and track runners, and their daughter was state champion in the mile, as I recall, one of the greats. And so, kind of reflecting on some of those issues, you mentioned, I've been talking developmental courses, you used the term remedial. They're the same. The General Assembly in 1911, see what? Now you know why I'm retiring. In 2011, within the budget, they put constraints on the universities getting reimbursed through the state share of instruction for remedial courses at most of our universities. At certainly, 11 out of the 14 universities are constrained to get reimbursed for developmental or remedial courses, so that won't be available any longer. Remedial courses are probably best positioned at our community colleges, but again, where remediation is called for, it's because a student didn't make a certain score. Right now, the scores are being fine-tuned to demonstrate a standard of career readiness and college readiness. But where they don't make that, I guess the whole point is, at that point, they either go to a community college to get remediation, or better yet, put them in the entry-level course, the entry-level college course, give them a little bit more support, and I think you're going to find that more and more students can make it. And that's a good thing, too, because that's the inducement to stay with it and ultimately get the degree. The whole objective and the planning on the part of every institution has to be the ultimate completion by that student. That's where the success comes. Thank you very much. This has been great.
Today at the City Club of Cleveland, we have been listening to a Friday forum featuring Jim Petro, Chancellor of the Ohio Board of Regents. Thank you, Mr. Petro. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. This forum is now adjourned.
For information on upcoming speakers or for podcasts of the City Club, go to cityclub.org.
PNC is proud to support the presentation of this City Club of Cleveland Friday Forum on WVIZ PBS.
Additional support comes from Cleveland State University. Support for closed caption transcripts of City Club forums is provided by the Nordson Corporation Foundation.